right. Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the After Show. This episode looks a little bit different, as you can tell. I'm here with Evan
Live in the flesh in New York.
live. It's Saturday afternoon. Obviously, this is airing
Feels like
on
when they used to have the
Sunday.
reunion shows like live.
Right, right. But it was
But
live
this is the
Sunday.
pre-finale reunion.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
right. So we're gonna jump into this episode a little bit, and then we're also just gonna do a little bit of a recap of the season and kind of talk about different people's win equity heading into the finale here. We have our final four. Um, yeah, okay. Well, let's start with this episode. We really start with immunity, and this is you've told me one of your favorite kinds of challenges. It's like the gift shop where we kind of do a walk down memory lane.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really highlighted as much in the episode, but you have all these different props from the season we held on to for this moment. I just love reusing that challenge too. It's the exact same mathematical formula to win. You just get to change out the props from how it was in season 3.
I didn't make it that.
Yeah. No, it's crazy how many people like bring up different items. It's like, how do you not know this like adds up?
Right.
Fun challenge. Ryan does great in that challenge when he wins it. He won it pretty fast too. It's definitely that was fun to see them because we filmed that right after the double too, so they were running on fumes at that point. So
Tensions were running.
tensions were high. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not as clear from the edit how we when we film the challenges, but you can tell from I think Monica's demeanor, especially in the episode. It's like, yeah, this was right.
This was intense. Yeah, yeah. The sun just peeked back through the clouds.
A little bit of golden hour.
Move it this way.
No, but love that challenge. And then we have the chip party reward. I think that's our last reward. Crazy reward. This season.
Freezing. There we go. We're back. Yeah, lots of rewards this season.
Well, I think that's part of the moral. It's always like, who do you pick for these rewards? It's not so much a moral dilemma. It's just like choices you have to make.
Yeah.
It's fun to see.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's move into the vote of this episode. Annika goes home. At this point, she's the only true snake remaining. You could argue, Jude's kind of had this snake story, but Annika's the only original snake. It definitely seemed pretty cut and dry. These past couple episodes, we've kind of seen the Doves reunite after having, some differences of opinions. Do you think there was anything that Annika could have done? Was there anything she really did wrong?
Yeah, I think Annika makes an amazing argument for herself in this episode, especially at the tribal council. She brings up great points, especially trying to flip it on Jude. I think her biggest fault was she made too good an argument for herself. She was like, I'm so unlikable. I'm so like snotty and nasty. And I think she argued it so well. People were like, yeah, you're going to clearly flip on this for the jury in the end. You're such an articulate, great arguer. I think what the better play here would have been to just keep up that snotty, nasty persona that she kind of had from the last episode where things weren't going her way. And people see that on their own. I think like maybe acting, committing to the bit was more the play this episode, rather than saying as much like, oh, I'm so no one likes me. Let's not believe that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this season that they're definitely like Iman are really capable of pulling off the theatrics.
Oh,
that's in there. But I think at this point it was all just really raw. It was really just emotional. We reached a point in the game where it felt really intense emotionally, and so maybe we were past that.
Didn't have it in her for one last act.
The final act. Yeah. No, it was tough. I mean, I think definitely like Annika had a solid argument, and you never know what the challenge is gonna be, and if she won, like, sometimes it's like you can't really pass up an opportunity to take out someone who you perceive to be the biggest threat in the game at the point.
Exactly. And do you think they made a mistake not taking out Jude? I mean, Annika can't help it as a man challenge. That's just not her strong.
Yeah.
But I mean, Jude was sitting right there. No vote. No anything. No one even stopped him from plotting against Red Now Trouble. So I was kind of surprised they didn't make a move on Jude for this.
Because Jude definitely has an interesting story. I've talked about this kind of throughout, but it's one of my favorite stories of the season. And so I don't know, maybe people just aren't seeing that. I think Annika's story is similarly compelling, and because there are so many snakes on the jury, you can make an argument. There's a bee.
Is it on me? You can tell how much I hate bees. Anyways,
Oh, is it gone? Okay.
this is degrading.
Welcome to Washington Square Park in New York. The first sunny day of the year. But no, yeah, with all the snakes being on the jury. Sorry, that was so funny.
I would
I
never
definitely
last on real estate. I think a bee would land on me and I would net it back
Net it
from
back
the
at me.
game.
I definitely could see an argument for Annika being a bigger jury threat in that
Uh-huh.
sense. Objectively, like
She
all
has
the
the front.
snakes are on the
Yeah.
jury, you know. And then with Lucas, it's a flaw.
I didn't say anything.
Um, with Jude, sorry, like he has people, you know, kind of, but it's not as clear. Like Iman is voting for Annika at the end, you know, like period, right? With Jude, I don't know if he really has those like guaranteed numbers necessarily in that same
True.
way that you would foresee Annika maybe too.
I think yeah, that's great. Great points. I think should we just get into the win equity of it all? I think that's
Yeah,
probably
I was,
Friday.
yeah, that's exactly where I was
Before
gonna
dive
go.
further. So where do you want to start this off?
I don't know. I mean, I'd say let's start with Ryan Barry. You know, because
Okay.
what I think is really interesting about okay, we're back.
Okay.
So yeah, we're down in the dump story of the season. We see him win immunity. And he kind of starts to have things start to go his way as we get later on in the season, right? But on the other hand, right, it's like, yeah, like really, what is his win equity? Because we're looking at the final four here, you know, and it's like out of everyone else, I'm like, I would take Ryan to the end, right? Like he has this good relationship with Dunker, right? Dunker would probably bring him to the end. He has this really tight relationship with Elena. Elena would probably bring him to the end. And I don't really know what Jude would do, frankly, in this position, but I could see Jude also bringing Ryan to the end. So, you know, when talking about winner to the end, that sense, like I think Ryan has a really good chance to make the end at this point. But yeah, you know, he's kind of had right. But you know, he also has had this interesting story where he's really had this like basis in morality. It's like, you know, how much are people really gonna care about that when they're looking at who to vote for?
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing I love about Ryan's story is I think objectively no one's had their been dealt the shorthand in this game more than Ryan. I think just being down in the dumps back against the wall,
Yeah.
openly on the bottom for several weeks, getting the puzzle at that one point,
Yep.
openly just like everyone kind of I think especially the first double definitely his lowest point in the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
But despite that, he never compromised his own moral compass. He always voted how he wanted to.
Yeah.
How it aligned with his morals, and he was always loyal to the core, to
Yeah.
who he was loyal to. That he hasn't really backstabbed anyone in this game, to my knowledge.
No.
So how much do you take into account the theme of what we're going for this season, or is that something you disregard? This is just the game I'm gonna play, especially when the jury is predominantly people who didn't share that same compass
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
In the same way you see winners or no winners, you see players like Russell Hance lose because others didn't share those same values. Played a great game but didn't have the same compass.
Right. It kind of goes
We kind
the
of
other way. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Makes those last final three seeds.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Dunker.
Yeah.
You know, Dunker's had an immunity win or two. He's had these big idol plays. Oh, I don't know if I'd say they're big idol plays, but he has these idol plays. Yeah, he had two. You know, which certainly is impressive to find two. And this whole, you know, fake idol situation, whatever. But you know, people haven't really like. It seems they valued him as an alliance member very much. You know, so there's also kind of that piece of things, right?
Yeah. I think while like Barry was always on the bottom, Dunker was counted out by people more than anything this whole game. And it's almost this like I think the closest analogy I can think is like Danielle from Big Brother, but no, not Taylor from Big Brother, where her like she's on the block so many times. Ryan Dunker was the name I feel like for every
Yeah.
vote. Most of
As like the easy.
you went
Yeah.
home when you went home thinking it was Dunker going home, and it was actually you getting blindsided. And I think that says something that people always saw him as expendable and he outlasted all of them. They never actually knew where he stood in this game.
Yeah, he was unpredictable. He was the wild card.
It says something that like Annika was the only one that was able to kind of like build a relationship with him when most people couldn't even work with Annika. So that was kind of the most surprising combination of the game to me. Those two were so different.
Yeah.
So I think Dunker just played a quieter game. It's like this was a season of a lot of theatrics, a lot of loud, big, flashy moves, and Dunker was pretty quiet behind the scenes. He did two big idol plays without even being there.
Yeah.
And in part it worked because no one actually even knew where Ryan stood during that doubles.
Yeah. He didn't have to show his cards at all.
He didn't have to, and that might have been a misplay. It would have been interesting to see how that played out if he
Yeah.
hadn't played those two idols. He had those wings this
Yeah.
this last stage.
Maybe he would have played a little bit more bold at the end.
Especially this last vote, because he probably still would have had his two idols, and he could have controlled whoever he wanted
Oh,
to go home.
completely. Yeah.
That would have been, yeah. So
That definitely would have been interesting. Yeah. Well, I don't know. But if it was always out, there's always the chance they could have ended up playing them earlier than this point.
and we still have the final four end game, to really make a big one last week, because maybe I think that is the one thing his resume needs. It's a flashy move. So I do think the jury's gonna want to see them.
The jury, these are flashy people that
I
we're
think
looking at.
Monica, Lena, Iman,
Yeah.
and even to a degree Vince and
Yeah.
Lucas, I think all the snakes.
Right, they're
I was there
valuing
for
this
that.
more out in front gameplay. Let's talk about Elena. She's also been, I would say, we're kind of looking at a Final Four where they've all been on the quieter side, except for Jude, who we'll get to last, I think. But, Elena found this idol early on. She's been able to hold on to it, the entire game. And her name did come up a little bit, but she still avoided really ever getting any real votes, if she got any votes at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elena was definitely able to build connections with people on the snake side in a way I don't think any of the other OG dubs were able to in the post merge game. I mean, Jude had good relationships, but he had a head start with his time.
I would say like Ryan and Lucas also probably had a good relationship. Not that it amounted to much, but they definitely had a connection. But yeah, I would say the way that Elena did it and the way that like
people were
actually manifested in the game
for her.
Yeah.
She was, like Iman wanting to take her on the ring and such, and Lena wanted to take her ring while she was plotting against them.
Yeah.
I think definitely speaks to her. I think Elena has been the snake in a sense who's on the dove tribe from the very beginning. I thought,
she took the clue.
She took the clue. She held on to that. And I think she had that tight trio of her, Hannah, and Ryan Berry. That was a solid group. She was able to lead and carried her pretty far.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Jude, right? Jude's definitely played, I would say, probably the most dynamic game of the Final Four for sure. He votes all over the place, really. And not in a bad way. He's definitely the one who's kind of showing this moral dilemma, right? Others are really showing the dove side, others are really showing the snake side, and Jude kind of shows this dilemma where he's going back and forth, know.
I think when you think about the season, just from when we were casting it, there's the archetypes you want. You want the loyal to the core. We got that with Ryan Berry. We want the snake to the core. We got that with our Montana.
Yeah.
But also, the season, the reason it's not Heroes versus Villains is we wanted to focus on that changing aspect of the game, and I don't think anyone embodied that better than Jude, which is beautiful to see. It's so fun to watch play out.
The nurse. And
the fact that he's a nurse, like, oh my gosh. And he's still just the nicest guy.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
That's the reason he's able to do all this, because you talk to Jude and you think he's your number one, and he's just sweet. And he's this freshman, too. Like, great guy. Love Jude. Would scare me to death to play this game with him.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
Even this last episode, I think he's arguably, in my opinion, a bigger threat than Annika in a way. I mean, Annika has her two friends in the jury, but Annika has put a bad taste in some players' mouths for sure. As for Jude, you get snaked by Jude, and it's like, well, can you even be mad at the guy? Like, can you blame yourself as to where I don't think others were able to pull that off with the tact he did?
No, and I mean it's interesting, right? Because Elena and Ryan earlier in the season are like, I hate Jude. Ryan's writing his day, and he's like, I'm never working with Jude again. Now we see them at this point, and they had to change up on that.
Yeah,
He kind of was able to regain that trust, which I also think is a testament to, his social game and how much he's able to get people to trust him and also position himself in a way where people need his vote. They needed to rely on him and
yeah,
his information, and I think he positioned himself really, really masterfully with that.
yeah. He definitely steered the game how he wanted to, and I think everyone knew how snaky he was. He was. It's not like it's gonna be some big reveal at the final travel, and yet he was still able to. The fact that he's able to snake the biggest snake of the game speaks a lot to him.
Yeah,
So for Elena and Ryan was more a saving their skin kind of move.
yeah,
For Jude, it was I did this because I can,
yeah.
because I'm
Agency.
controlling this game.
Yeah, options, agency. Yeah, we definitely see that with Jude, and I love the bit with the shoes where he's changing
Oh,
his shoes. The dude just happened to have green and purple Converse. I mean,
uh,
come on, like,
no, that was one of
I
the
could,
casting questions.
right? You have green and
Right,
purple
right.
clothing,
On the screener.
right?
No, and I think I think back to like the very third episode when they have the
The very third.
yeah, the very there's only one where they have the choice to vote someone off or not on the Dove tribe.
Yep.
And they don't vote up anyone. I
Yeah.
said you could have just missed your chance to let the winner of this game slip past your fingers. And that's true because a Dove is gonna win this
Yep.
game. The question is, Jude had immunity at that vote. If anything would have happened, I think it would have been him.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that could have been a game altering immunity.
Right.
Right.
Was he the one who slipped through? Was that it?
It was one of the four.
It was.
So
It was very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Great foreshadowing. Great foresight there.
I know. I was so happy that line paid off because I think you're watching the early season and you think the
Like-
snakes are these so dynamic players. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, of course it's gonna be the snakes. They're gonna, but it's this a season of such loudness. It's the quiet and the counted out were able to really make their way to the end. Everyone was so busy, shanking each other.
Yeah, I mean it's the people who like on a cassette, like they waited to start playing more aggressively, and that in this season that was the winning game. That was what paid off.
Because you don't have to be better than everyone. You just have to be better than the two people next to you
Yep.
at the end. So,
Yeah, and you just have to make it to the end. And that's
Exactly.
what it's really about. Well, let's talk about player. Oh, yeah, that was June. Okay, yeah, let's talk about player of the episode.
of course.
Looking back at this last one, it's hard, like you were saying. Like, is there really anyone that this benefited most, right? Because for Jude, now I would say he's probably arguably the biggest threat going into Final Four, right? So was letting Annika go really like best, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
allowing that to kind of be what happened. But was there ever really a choice for anything else to happen? Then you could also argue that, maybe Jude is more likable at the end and a bigger jury threat than Annika in that regard, right? Like we were saying, right? So was it better? Would it have been better for the other 3 or 4 to target Jude instead? Like who was this really optimal for?
Yeah, I mean, I would, if I did, you don't know what the final four maybe is going to be, but
No.
I would bank on Jude winning out over Annika. Annika hasn't proved as adept at challenges as Jude does. I mean, you have no idea what it's going to be, but
Yeah.
I think they've each won one immunity, and I think Jude was more. I mean, Annika's was a social challenge.
Yeah,
It's not going to be a social final four challenge.
Yeah.
That's the one thing you know
yeah,
for a
you
fact.
can count on that.
So I would have banked more Jude. So are we talking about player of the episode?
Yeah, let's
I think I would give it to Jude because I think Jude, he knew he was going to miss this, and he was able to pull off a double in a way that set him up for success. That he didn't have to be there, or even really advocate for himself in the vote. He still stayed, and the person he wanted to went home because the players felt like they had to.
Yeah.
Very tactful on his part, I think.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was talking a little bit with Jude last week, and because he knew he was missing this one, he was like, oh, he like realized he had to flip last week in order to set himself up best for this week, because he didn't have a vote, and, all these things. Or he wasn't sure if he would. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, no, it's hard because it's right. It's like who really controlled things here, who really is benefiting from this. Like I said, I fear that this leaves Jude as a wide open target going into Final Four. So I think I'll give it to Elena here, right? She kind of comes out with her idol a little bit, and that's definitely a moment. It's like, oh, that's who had the top idol all along. And again, I would say she gets what she wants. And
Yeah, I think that honestly, you bring up a good point. Jude might have, he might have needed Annika there at the final four because I think right now Jude is a front runner to win this game,
Yeah.
and not having when you can't compete in the final four immunity and you don't have a shield there, it could be.
yeah,
We'll have to see. I think the more reason I think I just didn't like how what Elena didn't. I just think I wish she'd done something flashier at the idol. I
Yeah.
think that is she's played a great game. She's built great social relationships. But I think just like a flashy move, maybe something could a little cherry on top.
You were saying this jury is a flashy jury. They like
Having that
flashy
immunity
things.
at the very end of nice, but she was so kind of like disinterested playing that. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna play it. Like sure. I don't know. I think maybe that's why I don't give it to her. And I the same reason I think Dunker and Ryan Berry just kind of needed a flashy
Yeah.
something. And I think taking Jude out, leaving Annika out of the vote. I think if you had left Annika surprised that she stayed, she didn't even know what's happening. So then she can't really take credit for saving herself. I think
It takes her agency out of
takes
it,
her agent. It's like another vote where she's out of it. She doesn't know what's going on.
even though it's literally saving her. Yeah.
Even that's what I saving her. Because I think you can save Annika as long to clear to the jury. She didn't save herself.
Yeah.
You can't give her this credit.
Yeah.
That could have been nice to see, but see how it all plays out.
Yeah. No, well, it's been a great season.
It has.
We have
It's
one
been fun.
big episode left.
Big. I think it's the most fun.
Yeah, it's definitely there are some shocks.
There's some shocks. We were all a little gagged at some points. It's very memorable. And there's one last little twist because of course there is.
Always another moral dilemma, and I think it's the perfect bow on the season. I think everyone's story has like its complete arc, I would say.
Oh yeah, I would
Like, I
agree
think
with that.
like it's not like it's like, oh, but like everyone's story has some kind of bow put on it.
Yeah, and it
Whatever
really
happens.
encapsulates the story you're able to tell about that player. I think that's a really nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Also, it's a great Final Four challenge. Probably, I would say the hardest Final Four challenge.
It's a
we've
tough
ever done.
one. It's pretty intense.
Even
yeah.
yeah. I was kind of watching that. I was like, damn, we really did this.
We really did that.
They really want this.
I know.
But you guys don't miss it. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a good one. Well, with that, we will see you next Sunday for the recap of the finale episode, last after show of the season.
Yeah.
Thank you all for tuning in. I will see you soon.